All right, good afternoon. Sixth period, Liberty North AP and dual credit psychology. All right, today's September 30th, and we are going to be starting notes over Unit 2, which is Thinking Critically with Psychological Science. Okay, just a couple announcements. I sent a picture via Twitter that has your Unit 2 information, your quiz dates, and it also has the results to our spatial reasoning, spatial intelligence study that we did over the last 2 days, Monday and Tuesday. Okay, so make sure you take a look at the picture. All right, and then if you want to have your learning targets out, hopefully you've either taken a picture of this doc or you've accessed it on Canvas. It is on Canvas, but we're on Unit 2, and we're going to be discussing and answering learning target number 1 and number 2. Okay, so number 1 is differentiate types of research with regard to purpose, strengths, and weaknesses, which is right here, and discuss the value of reliance on operational definitions and measurement in behavioral research, which is right here. Okay, all right. So I'll be accessing and kind of referencing the items behind me here as we go. All right, now, again, just a reminder that the learning targets do not go in the same order as the textbook, so the sequence is mixed up. So as a result, again, we're always going to default and do learning targets in order, but I've got the page numbers up here for the book. Okay, so we're doing AP Learning Target 1 and 2, which are pages 38 to 53 through your textbook. And most importantly, there's a chart on page 53 that helps you answer all of learning target number 1. So you need to make sure that you access that, and I've got that written both. And then after this live stream, I'll send a pic of this picture on Twitter as well, okay? All right. Okay, so let's start number 1, differentiate types of research in regards to purpose, strengths, and weaknesses. So that is right here, okay? Now, the first thing we need to know about all the different research methods in behavioral science is that they can fall into 2 categories, one of 2 categories: qualitative, descriptive research, or quantitative cause and effect research, okay? Qualitative research is anything that just describes a relationship or is descriptive in nature, which is most of the research methods in behavioral science, okay? These are all right here. So the first 5 are all qualitative, meaning they describe something, okay? Only the last one, an experiment, is quantitative, okay, because it has a control element to it. It has control variables. As a result, I can say that there's cause and effect, okay? Now, in other sciences, like in physical science, I think the definitions are different, because I think if you have any type of data analysis, statistical analysis, numeric analysis, it's quantitative, okay? That is not the case in psychology and behavioral science. I have to have a control group. I have to have control for it to be cause and effect. I can have all the data analysis I want, but I can still have tons of data analysis and it still be qualitative, okay, if there's not a control variable, all right? So just be aware of that. Sometimes there's a confusion there, especially if you've taken a lot of other sciences. So again, we're in the realm of behavioral science with psychology. So we study people. That is much more complex because you can't control people the same way that you could control chemicals, rocks, elements. You just can't do that. There's ethical restraints there, and people are very complex, okay? So it just makes it tough, which is why I think mostly in behavioral science, we're doing qualitative research, because we remove that control element because it just makes it very tough, okay? So qualitative is descriptive, quantitative is cause and effect, okay? Now you're gonna have to know these when you do your journal critique assignment in your groups, and you have your research journal. Again, you're gonna have to tell me what type of method was used in the research and whether it was qualitative or quantitative, okay? So this will be important to refer back to. All right, I'm gonna go down in this order. These are in the order of the textbook, okay? First method is a case study, all right? And a case study is qualitative, okay? It's descriptive. Now it gives us a lot of descriptive data, because a case study is basically an in-depth look or analysis at one individual or a small group of individuals over an extended period of time, okay? So in psychology, we actually use case studies a lot for our basic research. So just the gaining of general knowledge. We'll look at people who have been diagnosed with certain disorders or neurological illnesses, or who have had traumatic brain injuries. And we're going to take the opportunity then to study them for the rest of their lives and follow them so that we can get data on treatments, symptoms, progression. So again, the very famous case of, I just forgot it. Phineas Gage, okay, which we'll talk about next unit. Okay, but in 1848, he survived a very traumatic brain injury of getting a tapping rod shot through his head. And so the doctors he was a case study. So once he kind of healed, they followed him and documented, everything for the rest of his life because they knew it was going to be important to science. Okay, so that's kind of what we like to do, is we find those occurrences and then we study them. Okay, in psychology, we also do a lot with disorders. So if you have a rare disorder, or even if it's depression or anxiety, we're going to follow people in case studies and just monitor and gain information about the disorders. Okay, now for the example for all of these, I'm going to be using the two variables of caffeine and sleep. Caffeine is going to be my independent variable. Sleep is going to be my dependent variable. So if I want to do a case study on individuals, I might take, maybe I know somebody or find somebody who consumes a lot of caffeine, and maybe find somebody who doesn't consume caffeine at all. They abstain from it. And then I'm going to follow them throughout their life for an extended period of time and just see the differences between the two. Okay. All right. Number 2 is observation. And in your book, it's called naturalistic observation. Okay, it's important to know there are actually 2 types. There's naturalistic, which for those of you who are people watchers, that's what you're doing. And then there is laboratory observation. Okay. The difference is exactly what you probably think. A lab observation is in a controlled setting. It's in kind of a fake habitat, controlled environment. A naturalistic observation is observing people in their own habitat, their own environment. Okay. So in psychology, there's a very famous study, which we will talk about, which is the Bandura Bobo doll experiment performed by Albert Bandura on aggressive behavior in children. So he wanted to observe and look for instances of aggressive behavior in children. Now, he could do that in a naturalistic way and just go someplace where children naturally play, like a playground or whatever, and observe the children and document cases of aggressive behavior. He might be there for hours and never see any. And also he might get the police called on him. The naturalistic setting is tougher. It's more complex. So what he did is he created a playroom inside the lab and brought children in. Okay. And then that way he could have more control over the behaviors and the things that were exhibited and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, if I'm doing caffeine and sleep, I can do the same thing as I did with the case study. I can maybe find a couple of people who consume lots of caffeine daily and those who abstain from it. And I can just observe them in their natural habitat. I could observe them at school. I could observe them at work throughout the day. I could set up a monitoring system maybe at night if I really wanted to see how it impacted their sleep schedules. Okay. That would be more of a naturalistic observation there. Okay. A controlled one would be, they come in to do a sleep study. Okay. So we have sleep clinics where people are monitored while they sleep at night. And that'd be kind of more of a controlled. It's not their own bed. It's in a lab. Okay. Also qualitative. So these first 2 are descriptive in nature. They're both qualitative. Okay. Number 3, survey, which everybody is familiar with, especially if you're a student. You get hit with lots of surveys every year. So surveys, questionnaires, same thing, are a set of questions that help me infer or get descriptive data on people's beliefs, attitudes, and just their opinions. All right. So on a survey, I could set up a survey, and the first part would be about caffeine consumption. How much caffeine do you consume a day? What are the means? And then I could also have a sleep section, rate your sleep, your quality of sleep. Okay. And then that would be descriptive as well. It's just going to describe a relationship that exists between my independent variable caffeine and my dependent variable sleep. Okay. All right. Number 4 is actually the most in-depth descriptive qualitative method that we have. And the book puts, actually correlation has a much bigger section to it, because a correlation not only tells us if something is related, it tells us how it's related and how strong of a relationship it is. So this one goes in a little bit more in depth as far as the descriptive qualitative information that it provides. Now, correlation is a data analysis tool. It's a statistical analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather input either through interview, survey, case study. I'm going to collect data on caffeine and sleep. Okay, and I'm going to put it into this formula, and then it's going to spit out a number between +1 and -1. Okay, so you got this range. So +1, 0, and -1. Okay. +1, anything closer to the +1 is considered a positive correlation, which means the 2 variables go in the same direction, either up or down. Okay. 0 means they're not related at all, which is an illusory correlation. So there are tons of variables that we test that we think have a relationship, but it turns out that they actually don't. It's illusory. Okay. So superstition is a great example of that. So if I am superstitious and I feel like I have to do some type of action or behavior or ritualistic thing before a performance competition that I think affects my performance, I think that they're related. but actually, if we probably scientifically looked at it, it would be close to zero, okay? Meaning that they're not actually related. It's coincidence, it's classical conditioning, or whatever. Now, some of you will probably argue that with me, but that's kind of a good example, okay? All right. And then the negative one side is a negative correlation, which means that the variables go in opposite directions, okay? So a correlation is going to tell me that, you know what, sleep and caffeine are related. And not only that, they're negatively correlated, okay? They're negatively related, meaning that if caffeine goes up, sleep goes down. If caffeine goes down, sleep goes up, okay? So they're a negative correlation. And not only that, I believe their correlation coefficient is negative 0.7 or above. So it's closer to that. It's pretty close to that negative 0.1, which shows you that it's a strong negative correlation, okay? All right, so caffeine and sleep are related. They're negatively related, correlated, and also that they have a very strong relationship correlation, okay? So that's the difference with correlation. So it goes a little bit more in depth into the qualitative descriptive part, all right? Number 5 is test. This is not in your book. I've kind of added this because I think that tests are used a lot in behavioral science. A test is basically an experiment, but there is no control variables, okay? So it looks like a complex procedure. Actually, again, we did a test when we tested for spatial reasoning. We'll do a test when we test for memory on Thursday and Friday. Okay, so basically a test has one or multiple independent variables and then the dependent variable, okay? But there is no control. So I know a test on caffeine that I've seen is that they had 4 groups of subjects and then they had 4 different types of caffeine. So they had energy drinks, coffee, tea, and soda. So the participants were divided into 4 groups, and each week they rotated through each of the 4 independent variables. So week 1, they were with energy drinks. Week 2, they were with coffee, tea, and soda. Okay, so they got all 4 independent variables, and then they measured their sleep, okay, and rated their sleep. Okay, now, pretty complex procedure, but there is no control variable, so it's a test, which is qualitative. So again, it's just helping us describe the relationship between caffeine and sleep. Okay. Now, the last method, which is quantitative, and the only one that is an experiment. Okay. And only an experiment can show cause and effect because it has a control variable, a control element to it. Okay. So if we go back to my test, I could pretty easily turn that into an experiment by adding 2 groups. So, or 2 more variables. So I have my energy drink, coffee, tea, and soda. I can then add a water group, right, which would be control. And then I could add a placebo group, a variable, a fake independent variable. So I could do like decaffeinated coffee, tea, or soda, okay? So now I've got 6 groups, 4 independent variables, 2 control variables, and I've got 4 groups of subjects. So I could still rotate all 4 subject groups through all 6 variables, okay? Now though, instead of just doing 4 independent variables, I've got 2 other control variables that they're also gonna hit, which is going to make it quantitative and control. So at the end of an experiment, I could say caffeine causes sleep issues or a decrease in sleep, okay? And I can put that cause effect clause in there because I have my 2 control variables with the water and the fake, the placebo caffeine, okay? All right, so once again, look at chart on page 53, okay? For more information for learning target 1. All right, learning target number 2, okay, is up here, right? And that basically states discuss the value and reliance on operational definitions and measurements in research, okay? So we kind of talked about this yesterday when we did our study on spatial reasoning, okay? An operational definition, and it's a vocab term, so you will find it, but the easiest way to think of it is operational definition is kind of a roadmap. It's instructions. It's a guide on how to reproduce or duplicate a research study that has already been done by somebody else. Okay, so if I do a research study here in Kansas City, I need to make sure that my research is all elements are operationally defined, meaning that I define all my variables, I identify the measurements, the materials that were used, I give a detailed summary of the procedure. So let's say that somebody in St. Louis who wanted to do my study could do it just by looking at my operational definition, okay, and the summary of my, the instructions of my research, so they could walk them through it so that they could reproduce it and replicate it in St. Louis, okay? And again, the key to all research is replication. We want replication, all right? So I want other researchers to be able to duplicate my study because I want them to verify it in a sense. verify my results. Okay, so I want to make sure I have a good instruction manual, a good map that walks them through the experiment or the study or the research so that they can duplicate it. Okay. All right. And another good quote is, good science is always reproduced or reproducible. Okay. So not only in the experiment or the research design, but also in the results. Okay. So I want people to be able to replicate my actual study, follow my instructions, but I also want them to replicate my results. And if they do, then I have valid and reliable research. I've got good science. Okay. Now, if they can't replicate it because I don't give them a good enough map and they're not finding the same results, then my research is invalid. Okay. It's not valid nor reliable. Okay. All right. And this is kind of it's simple, but this is kind of the key to good science, which I think in today's society we have lost. Okay. We've lost the ability to think scientifically and critically. Because you guys, and we've already talked about this, we all the time are bombarded with a recent study found blank or blank, okay? Now, the first thing we need to do if we're thinking critically and scientifically is go, okay, has this study been replicated? Are there other studies that have done the same thing? And are they reproduced, the results, okay? If they're not, then that study should never be brought up. Again, anything that stands alone, either nobody's replicated it or nobody has found the same results, is not valid, it's not reliable, okay? So we need to be scientific minded when, the media just starts launching studies out there, so on and so forth. And we need to be able to say, okay, we need to go a couple steps further. Has it been replicated? Are they getting the same results? Okay. If it stands alone, just cast it aside. Okay. Other people have got to replicate it and reproduce it. Now, the key to that is that I have to give them a correct roadmap, right, of how to duplicate the study. Now, when you do your journal critique assignments, again, this is going to happen in the method section. Okay. In the method section of the journal, they're going to give you the roadmap to how the research was done, the materials, the measurements. They're going to define all your variables. They're going to give you a step-by-step process of the procedure so that then if I even just read the journal, I could go and reproduce and replicate that study and then hopefully get the same results. Okay. All right. All right, so by far, learning target number 1 is the biggest, and then the rest of them are pretty short, kind of like this one. They all kind of relate together with just learning what makes science good quality science, valid and reliable science, okay? All right, so I'll post a pic of this on Twitter. Don't forget, I put all the assignments in for unit number 1. So if you are missing assignments, since it is the first kind of unit with blended learning, you can turn those in late. All right, but get those to me either today or tomorrow, okay? If you have any questions, just email me. Happy Virtual Wednesday.